order in the court. The case of humanity v. Satan will now commence. Let the record show that the accused has requested a bench trial in accordance with his rights. Prosecutor, call your witness.
The prosecution calls Satan to the stand. Mr. Satan, you have been charged with facilitating the fall of man. Are you in fact guilty of this charge?
I am not.
So, were you not the serpent?
Absolutely not. That whole thing came about later, when I was villainized and people decided I was responsible for this whole mess that is your world. But I was not then, nor am I now, the serpent that tempted Adam and Eve.
Why should we believe you? Aren't you the one who does all evil? Aren't you the rebel against God?
I was God's accuser. His prosecutor, if you will. I did for him the job you are doing here. Does that make you the enemy of the public? If I had been in the garden that day, it would only have been under the orders of God.
So you're saying God set up the fall of man?
I can't say. That is for the court to decide. But I can say that it was not me. Nothing even points to me except for claims about my identity as a serpent thousands of years later. I was never given opportunity to refute these claims, and there was, until that time, no reason to claim them at all. This charade is nothing but hearsay and conjecture.
I'm through with this witness.
Well, Mr. Satan, I don't have a lot of questions for you, and you've already touched on a few, so this should be brief. Were you in God's employ during creation?
I was.
What was your job?
As I said, I was God's chief accuser. I was to find people of doubtful faith and accuse them before him.
So it sure sounds like you would have been the one in the garden, doesn't it?
No, not really. Like God, I do not require physical presence to interact with the world. So why would I appear as a snake? Why would I disguise myself? And it was my job to accuse directly to God. I acted only under his instruction when I found someone whose faith I suspected was false or contingent upon God giving gifts.
I see. Were you punished or reprimanded in any way after the temptation of Adam and Eve?
No, I was not.
Was anyone punished, other than Adam and Eve?
Yes, the serpent.
How was he punished for his role in the fall of man, and the temptations of Adam and Eve?
God cursed the serpent above all livestock. He said it would crawl on its belly and eat dust all its life. He said that there would be enmity between their offspring forever, that their children would strike at each other.
So he is clearly speaking to one of his created beasts that is just more clever and malicious than the rest?
I think that is obvious. Why would he punish the serpent, and every serpent ever born, with eternal crawling, dust-eating, and violent enmity, if it were just me in disguise?
And who would know better than God whether or not it was actually you? Is it at all possible for you to have disguised yourself from God?
Absolutely not. In fact, you really should bring up to him just why he had such a creature created. Why he put it into the garden. Why he gave it speech and bad moral character. There are a lot of questions you should ask, that I don't have answers to. You're just wasting time by asking me. The fact is, I am completely innocent of your charges against me. I remained in God's employ after the fall, working as his accuser. It was I who brought the man known as Job to God's attention.
So would God have fired, or punished you, if you had been responsible for what you are charged with?
What do you think? The guy dispenses punishment more often than an S&M fetishist in a 24/7 sex dungeon. If I had actually done anything, do you think he'd be making friendly bets with me over how faithful somebody is, or is not? Do you think he'd let me test people? Not a chance.
Your Honor, I think we have demonstrated conclusively that Satan was not the serpent in the garden that day. I think it is clear that he was an employee in good standing, and that he remained as such precisely because it was not he who tempted Adam and Eve. Clearly, God punished an actual serpent and its heirs as the culprit, and could not fail to know if it were actually Satan in disguise. I believe it is clear that Satan was framed. He was clearly retroactively identified as the serpent when new narrative and adversarial doctrine was needed to explain the incongruities between the old and the new beliefs. so I request that a not guilty verdict be declared, and all charges dismissed now and forever, in accordance with the law. It is clear that my client is not the guilty party.
Agreed. The prosecution utterly failed to meet its burden of proof for the claim of Mr. Satan's guilt. I find the defendant not guilty on all charges in the fall of man. The defendant is to be released from custody immediately, with apologies from the court. Mr. Satan, you are free to go.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Do we have any word on the whereabouts of God?
No, Your Honor, they have yet to find him. He is apparently hiding in a gap somewhere, but as soon as we find him, we will bring him in for trial.
Very well. See that it is done quickly. Court is now dismissed.
This has been another episode of Reasonable Doubt, put on by the Church of the Basement Dragon. Thank you for watching, and thank you for thinking.